What's up, y'all? Ryan from Oakland Ghost, and today I'm gonna show you the newest synth to my synth arsenal, the Oberheim TEO 5. Now, the TEO? I'm gonna stick with TEO. It sounds a little more exotic. Now, the TEO 5 is not a new synth. It's been out for about a year at this point, although they did just recently drop the desktop module version, which is a little more compact form factor, doesn't have the keyboard, but is otherwise identical to the original TEO 5. But if you've watched my channel before, you know that I don't really buy the newest, latest and greatest gear. I'm not a professional gear reviewer. I don't buy gear and then make content and then turn and burn and sell and buy the next greatest thing. That's not what I'm after. I love gear and I am looking to collect it, but I like to collect things that inspire me and allow me to continue creating the type of music that I like to make. Let's talk about the TEO. I am going to do an overview, but again, like I said, it's been out for a year. So if you're looking for like really in-depth nuts and bolts type of situation, I recommend Loop Hop or any number of videos. There's plenty on YouTube if you really want to dig in and see what everything that this is all about. I'm going to give a general overview. I'm going to give you my first impressions, and I'm going to give you my first impressions as a musician who actually uses this gear, not someone who just reviews this gear. That's the goal of this video. So I guess the first question is, why the TEO 5? I think that's a great question. There's a lot of polysynths out there. Now, I'm the type of person that loves analog, and I have lots of analog monosynths, but I was kind of in that position where it was time for me to get a poly. Like, I want to explore sound design a little bit more, and I need something that could do chords, like all that kind of stuff. But I do love analog. I want to stick with analog. And I think a better question is, if you're in the market for an analog polysynth, why wouldn't you first consider Oberheim? The name Oberheim is literally synonymous with polysynths. Now, I'm not going to go and say that like he created polysynths, but he was certainly a pioneer and probably the first to market with a commercially viable polysynth. So much like Moog is to monosynths, Oberheim is to polysynths. It's just a name that means class. It means the best. I mean, you've heard it on 1,000 albums and you probably didn't even know it. That's Oberheim. You know the Oberheim sound whether you know the Oberheim sound. That's the first reason that I would consider an Oberheim. But the second reason is, well, you know, Oberheim has traditionally, because the name is synonymous with classic poly analog synthesis like Moog is to mono, that name comes with a price. It comes with a price. It's cost prohibitive for most people, I would say, including myself. I mean, I would probably be getting a divorce if I went and bought an OB8. Before the TEO, you were looking at dropping at least $5K for an Oberheim. And that's looking at the OB6. I mean, you're dropping $5K. Now the TEO comes in, and I'm not going to say it's affordable. That's up to you. But the desktop version is coming in at about $1,400, and the full size version with the keyboard is coming in about $18 to $2,000, depending where you get it. So is that affordable? That's for you to decide. That's a thing you have to decide. What I will say is that for an analog polysynth, it's certainly competitive. It's very competitive. And for a Oberheim, it's outright cheap. Like, you could not get an Oberheim for almost twice that before this synth came out. And on top of that, this synth was kind of a collaboration with Sequential Circuits, which made the Take 5. It's the same form factor. I mean, if you're looking at it, it's basically the same thing. There's, in terms of the layout, not in terms of the synth itself. And while you can get those traditional, like, Oberheim sounds that you're probably looking for if you're looking for an Oberheim, it's very much a modern synth, and we will get into that in the overview. That's mostly because of a very, very complex and in-depth mod matrix where you can get super weird and you can really, really sound design on this thing, and I can't wait to dig into it. Enough about that. That's why I got it. Let's take a look at it. Let's play with it. Let me give you a general overview, and maybe we'll get into some weird sounds if we have time. And then I'll just kind of wrap it up with, you know, what I think about it with my first impressions. I just got it, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know my way around synths, and that's how I like to do my first impressions anyway. So let's get into it. All right. So this is the Oberheim TEO 5. The TEO, of course, are Tom Oberheim's initials, the inventor of Oberheim, the founder, if you will, and the 5 denotes the amount of voices that you have available to play polyphonically. So, you know, you got before you start running out. And you know, that might actually be something to consider for some folks. For me personally, I mean, I've gotten plenty far with just monosynths, so 5 voices is plenty for me. I mean, most chords are 3 notes, and then you add a bass note. And I still have a note available. So for me, that's not a big issue. I will say that it's at the bottom end of probably what's acceptable for a polysynth. Typically, you're looking at more like 6 to 8, all the way up to 16, and even more with polychaining and whatnot. But like I said, for me, I'm not concerned with the voice count. I could see where possibly with maybe some really lush pads that have a super long release, that running out of voices and voice stealing could become a concern there. Also a lot of people really like Unison, which is where, it's playing all the voices are playing a single note, and you detune them to really get that thick sound, especially for bass. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I think it sounds a little watered down, and when I'm making bass sounds, I prefer to use a monosynth anyway. So again, not a big concern for me, but it might be a concern for you, so something to consider. Let's talk about the Oberheim TEO 5. What have we got? This is a fully analog synth, well, ish. The oscillators and the filter are, you got your 2 Oberheim VCOs. You've got an SEM variable state filter. Those are all analog. And then you have, I believe the envelopes are digitally emulated, as well as the effects are digital. It's kind of a hybrid. It's a little bit of both, I guess you could say. But you're getting an analog sound. So if you're looking for that classic analog Oberheim sound, I mean, you're going to get it. You're going to get it from here. That's and at an affordable price. So let's jump into it. Let's do an init patch. So the way you can do that, you can either go into the program settings. I will say there's not a lot of menu diving on this. Everything is pretty much on the front panel here that you're ever going to deal with. There are some things in the global, which are things like, changing your MIDI channels, basic stuff like that, recalibrating the VCOs, the basic stuff. And then in your program, you do have quite a few things. You'll have things like, detuning individual oscillators and, all that kind of stuff that you can get, that you can do in here. We'll probably dig into that in a little bit, but I'm going to start with an init patch. And the way you do that is you hold the -2 octave down, and then you push the low split right there, and boom, we got a basic program. And so what that's giving me is a single oscillator to start with. Now, your single oscillators, you have, looks like about 5 octaves, a 5-octave range for tuning. You can also detune those with semitones by going into the program menu. So if I were to go to, say, oscillator 1, I could detune it here as well by semitones. Each oscillator has, you got a triangle, which is probably your most pure sound, right? Oh, it's just so pretty. And then you got your saw, which it defaults to, which is probably one of the more harmonically rich things to start with. And then you have a pulse. And I actually just love the sound of that pulse wave. It's lovely. You do have pulse width, which of course you can modulate with the filter or the LFO, or as we'll get into later, any number of things. So you got your pulse width modulation there. Very, very nice. And now this is a similar factor to the sequential circuit Take 5. It's different. It's not the same, but it's similar form factor. On this particular synth, you can play all of the different oscillators together. So this would be a triangle and a saw wave, or a saw and a pulse, or just all of them. But you can't blend between those as you can on, say, like the Take 5. They're just all on or they're all off. And but you can get some, interesting new timbres by turning on different ones like that, right? Let's see, what do you got after that? We have a second oscillator. So it's a two oscillator plus a sub per voice, per each of the 5 voices, right? So let's, why don't we bring up the second oscillator? So you have your mixer section over here. As you can see right now, only oscillator 1 is on. We're going to tune on oscillator 2. And now we're getting two. We're getting oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. Now, by default, both of those are going to come in at full volume. And the way that you can change that, it doesn't have a mixer like the Take 5 does, but what you can do if you want to say turn down, let's just so you could hear it. Let's tune this up. So we're going to tune that bad boy up. And what you can do is you can, if you hold the note, if you hold the oscillator button, then you get your levels. So you can bring it in. And you can hear how the higher octave's going up. Right? So that's how you can do the mixer. And then it also has a sub. And the sub is 1 octave down, pulse wave. And same thing, you can adjust the volume. So maybe you only want just a little bit of sub in there, just to give it a little body. There you go. You can do a mixer just like that. You have sync. So let's bring that back down. Why don't we do oscillator sync? So we got them the same. I'm gonna put oscillator 1 up, and let's go up 2, just for the sake of this. All right, and we got sync on. So now, if I'm holding the note, you're getting the hard sync. It sounds really good on bass. And as you can hear, when I'm turning the knob by hand, it's stepping a little bit because that's just kind of how the oscillator tunes. But if I were to modulate this with, say, the LFO or one of the envelopes, it'd be perfectly smooth. And actually, I can show you something like that really quick. Let's just, we'll keep on the sync. I'll show you how easy it is to set up modulation. This is one of the things that really drew me to the synth is, a typical Oberheim it's just like this. It's everything on the front panel. What they don't have, like the OB6 or the OB8, is a mod matrix. And the mod matrix comes, that's more of a sequential thing. And it's very in-depth. And it's so easy to use here. So all you do is like you hit source. Let's say, for example, why don't we go to an open one? Yeah, here we go. This one's off. So you hold it down. You're going to turn whatever you want to be the source. In this case, I'm going to use envelope 1. Why don't we switch that? And then destination, I want it to be the frequency, so that we get that filter sweep or the sync sweep. And then the middle thing right there, that's just your attenuator. So as you can hear, now the filter is controlling the frequency sweep. Right? Super easy, super straightforward. And that's pretty much how the modulation works on all these, which we'll get into a little bit later. I'm going to just exit out of that. And let's reinitialize a basic patch so we're starting from scratch again. All right, so those are your oscillators. Like I said, you have the hard sync. It also has this thing called X-Mod. That's frequency modulation. Now, traditionally, frequency modulation is you're going to use one of the oscillators to modulate the frequency of another oscillator, which you can actually do through the mod matrix here if you really want to. The thing with frequency modulation is it pulls things. You can get some really interesting timbres, particularly metallic type sounds, but it's going to keeping it in tune is a freaking nightmare. With the X-Mod, let's see if we can hear it with the X-Mod. It's going to keep it playable. So the X-Mod is through 0 filter modulation. So it's keeping it in tune. Now you can still get crazy. Once you get up here, it starts getting pretty wild. But this is a really, really interesting feature that offers some really interesting versatility to get some really, really, really weird sounds. I haven't explored it too much. Maybe we'll check it out a little bit later. Let's move on to the filter. So the filter is a 12 volt per octave SEM state variable filter. It's that classic Oberheim sound. Let's just give it a look. So I'm going to put the resonance about halfway and do a little sweep. I mean, pretty tight, right? Let's crank up that resonance. So what's cool is, cool or maybe not desirable for some people, it doesn't self-resonate. But you are going to get, I mean, you can hear that crunchiness you get at the peak of the cutoff. It's just so chewy. That's how I describe it. It's just so cool. And you also don't lose the bass as you go through it, like you would on, say, a Moog ladder filter, for example, where you start losing the bass. That's not a problem here. Now, the other feature that's really interesting is it's state variable. And what that means is you have low pass, notch, and high pass. And you can smoothly blend between those. So let me find a... So now we're in notch. And now we're in high pass. Right? Notch. And what's great is all of these things are modulatable. So you can modulate all three and get some just crazy
textures. Or if you just want to deal with low pass or notch or high pass, it's just a knob twist away. And it actually also has bandpass. And the way you access that is in the program menu. Like I said, this is the only menu diving you have to do here, and it's pretty small, but it's one of the things in here. We'll just scrub down and find it. There we go. Bandpass, we're going to switch that on. And so now that middle one, now it's a bandpass filter as opposed to a notch filter when you get into the middle. And you can tell that's happening because this little BP, which is for bandpass, lights up right under it. So you do have both. I think, honestly, when I'm doing weird things like modulating the state, I kind of prefer the bandpass in most cases. But, they're both there for you. You can make your decision. All right, moving right along. So those are those. That's the filter. I forgot to mention it does have noise. It's right here. We're dealing with, I believe that's probably white noise. And again, going into the program menu, you can switch between the noise. There's, I believe, pink and white. Let's take a look. Oh, let's see. Yeah, see, this menu is not big, so it's not like you have to dig around for things in here very much. Yeah, there we go. Noise, white, or pink. Pink, which tends to have a little darker feel to me. So that's more like waves. Whereas white is more like the wind to me, in my head. So you have both pink and white also available to you here. And similar to the oscillators in the sub, you can control the volume by just holding it down and turning the knob, or going into the program menu and manually doing it as well. Okay, moving right along. So those are your oscillators as well as your filter, which are just instrumental in getting that Oberheim sound. That's what's going to give it to you. And then over here, we have our two envelopes. So you have two envelopes. One by default is controlling the filter over here. So, it's manually turning the cutoff for you. And then the bottom one is controlling the amp. So the shape of your sound. So if we wanted longer, right? So that's your amp. You also have both of these have velocity opening those filters a bit too, or envelopes, which is pretty cool too. I usually, probably when I'm in amp, I usually keep velocity on. Right? Nice little feature. But one of the cool things about this is if you hit this button here, what it's going to do is it's going to switch this to controlling both the amp and the filter, and that frees up this one to be an auxiliary filter, which you can use, or I keep saying filter, excuse me. So when this one's controlling the filter and the amp, it frees up this envelope 1, to be an auxiliary envelope that you could use for any kind of modulation sorts, whether you want that, like we did before, to control the frequency when you're hard syncing, or anything you can think of. You can use the envelope to control pulse width. You can use it to control effects. I mean, you can route it to wherever you want. But that's a pretty cool feature, is that you can kind of separate those things. And each one of these has an attenuator at the end as well. Just makes it, again, super easy having everything right there on the panel. And then lastly, there's a filter and gate mode, and that basically just makes it organ style, right? like it's however long you hold the note, and then it cuts off right away. So they basically control just the filter because it's not going to control the gate. The gate's going to be controlled by your key press. As far as the keybed is concerned, I'm not a piano player. My piano chops are extremely poor. All my other synths are actually desktop ones. The only reason I got this one is because I got an amazing deal on it. I was able to get this full-size keyboard version for a little bit less than actually what the desktop's going for at the moment. So it was just too good a deal to pass up. It is nice to have both velocity and I believe this has aftertouch. It does have aftertouch. I don't think I have it set up right now. You can hear it now. So it also has aftertouch. It's a per channel aftertouch, so it's not polyphonic aftertouch like, say, the Hydrasynth, but it's just another modulation source that you can use. It sounds like it's pretty mild on this init patch, but you can use it to modulate pretty much anything. So yeah, I mean, I opted for the keyboard version, not because I'm a good keyboard player. I am a guitar and bass player first, so I'm much more at home on something like a sequencer or the Deluge's like isometric keyboard, which is kind of laid out like a bass guitar. So my chops aren't here yet, but I do appreciate having the ability for velocity and the aftertouch to be able to add a little bit of additional expression. And with the Deluge, I'm able to use the Deluge as kind of my MIDI hub, and I can control all my synths with one keyboard. And having a nice keyboard to control all my other synths, it's just a nice little extra thing. And I like having the bigger workspace. This one is a little bit bigger than the desktop version. Otherwise, they're identical. So yeah, that's it. It's a Fatar keyboard with aftertouch and velocity. Really nice, feels good. If you like that, cool. If not, go for the desktop. No big deal. Yeah, so those are the filters. Moving right along, we have two LFOs. So LFO 1 is a mono LFO. It's that just means that it's only going to control, let's turn it on. Looks like it's controlling pitch right now. Let's take a look. Yeah, oscillator frequency. Right? So what mono means is no matter, it's always going to be in time with itself, right? It's not resetting per key press. It's keeping that. It's adding the notes, but the oscillations are in sync with one another. So that's the first LFO, and that LFO has a ton of different shapes. It's an attenuverter, so you can go negative. The frequency range is pretty wide on it. You have a triangle, you have a saw up, a saw down, a saw down, a pulse, and a sample and hold, which is basically random, right? That's just going to give you a bunch of weird random sounds. Right now, again, it's controlling the filter, or the frequency. And then you have your attenuator. It's actually an attenuverter, so you can go negative as well. And it's really easy to assign this to whatever you want. All you got to do is hold that destination, and let's say I wanted it on the cutoff instead. It's that simple. I mean, that's what I love about this. Like, the mod matrix is very complicated, or can be very complex, which we'll get into in a minute, but they make it so easy to use that it's just awesome. That's the first oscillator. The second oscillator, it is clock syncable. So the clock, you control the BPM here, or if you have a clock source coming in from some of your other gear controlling it, you can sync it, and then the frequency basically becomes like a clock division of that, however you want to set that up. The second LFO is actually a poly LFO. So let's do this one. Let's also send this one to, let's send it to all frequencies like we had before. So same deal, right? It's controlling the frequency. You can hear the LFO, but the difference is with a poly one, they're all different. You hear how they're not going in sync? So it's per channel. It's going to do that LFO at the key press, and it's not going to sync them all across, which opens up a lot of weird opportunities for some really cool modulation and interesting timbres and stuff like that. Other than that, similarly, it has you have your triangle, you have your saw up, saw down, pulse, and sample and hold. And again, it's also clock syncable, just like the other LFO. All right, moving right along. What else do we got? Oh, a couple other knobs over here. Before I forget, we do have a Unison mode. And so Unison, let's say we wanted a big, let's go down and make like a bass. All right, so we got Unison. If you want Unison, if you hold it down, you can select how many voices you want, up to 5. And basically what that's going to be is all those voices are going to play at the same time. So let's go with 4. And you can hear a little bit. But right now, most of those are in the same tune. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here, we're going to find Unison tuning, and we're going to tune it down a little bit so that each voice is a little bit out of tune with itself. Here we go. Unison detune. Right? You know, so there's just a quick basic example. Another hidden feature of the Unison, which is kind of cool, is it's also got a hidden kind of chord mode. So we can play a chord, and then you hit Unison, and now it plays your chord back. So it has chord mode hidden behind Unison, which is pretty cool. Portamento is, well, obviously, Portamento is glide. So it's the glide amount between notes. And the rate, is the amount of glide in between notes. Pretty straightforward. You can also do glide specifically to each oscillator as well. So if you wanted one oscillator to have less glide than the other, which again is just an opportunity to create some interesting timbres, you can do that through the program mode. I believe that's, let's see, there it is. You have the glide levels between the notes right there. And you can adjust them individually per oscillator if that's something that you are after. All right, and then the last things over here is we have an overdrive. So there it is by itself. Just add some crunch. I often like to use this kind of just right around there. Just adds a little crunchiness, a little more life to your sound. And then the last thing here is the vintage knob. And what the vintage knob does is it kind of makes, you know, one of the good things about old synths is they're messed up, bro. I don't know what else to say. They're messed up. They're a little bit out of some of the voices are a little bit out of tune with each other. Sometimes the filters aren't quite hitting at the same time. They're close, but they're a little bit off, and it's that little bit off that kind of gives you the magic. It's because they're old, right? And what the vintage knob does is basically emulate that. So again, similar to the drive, I kind of like that at about 12 o'clock most of the time. I just like to have it on there to... It's subtle. Wait, you know, it's the difference between clean... bit off. I don't know. It's nice. I like it. I usually leave it about 12 o'clock. Moving right along, we have our BPM and our clock divide. You have a tap tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you get your tempo. Or again, you know, you can just set it beep, beep, beep by twisting the knob or getting it from your clock source, whatever that may be. Over here, we have your arpeggiator. The arpeggiator is based on whatever the BPM is. Very simple arpeggiator, but pretty powerful. If we turn it on, right? So that's a 1 octave. We can hit it with a 2 octave. pretty dope. And then, 3 octaves. So yeah, there you go. And then down here we have repeats. So it's just how many times it'll play. If it's on 1, it does 2. If it's on 2, it does 3. If it's on 3, it does 4. That's nice and confusing, right? So it plays each note twice. Or here's 3 times. Or 4 times. Cool. And then lastly, you have your different modes. We have up. We have down. We have up and down, which is what we were listening to. We have random, which is random. And then the last mode is assign, which I believe is as played. That's what it sounds like to me. As played being it picks the arpeggio based on the order of notes that you put them in. So, or if I went. So it's just creating the arpeggio based on the order with which you program notes. Right. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It's not a super complex one, but it's very useful and it sounds pretty awesome. Oh, the other thing that it has is it has a hold mode. So if you're trying to like build a sound, one way that you could do that is like, say we had an arpeggio here that we liked. You hold. It's going to hold that, which is pretty rad. So that's a nice way to kind of, a lot of times when I'm just trying to come up with a sound, I might do a quick arpeggio, hit the hold, and then start turning knobs just to kind of help build up that sound. And then the last section here, we also have a sequencer. The sequencer is very bare bones, very, very bare bones. I can't imagine myself using it too often, other than similarly like the Arpeggiator, just making a quick sequence that I can then kind of tweak knobs to kind of get the sound dialed in. But, it's a 64-step sequencer. It allows for chords. It does take in your velocity or whatever other kind of settings you have going on. It records those as well. You can do chords or single notes, but basically you just set it to record, and you can, and then you could do rests, or you can do ties, so it ties it to the next note. And then maybe a rest. Sure. And then, you can play that back. And again, that's controlled by the BPM. So pretty straightforward. You can go up to 64 steps. Yeah, a basic sequencer, not one I see myself using terribly often, but it is nice to have. It's nice to be able to plug something in real quick. It's very similar to a key step or something like that. Simple. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I don't see myself using it that much. Last thing over here is we have our effects. I'm going to start with the reverb. Pretty straightforward. It's a plate reverb. You've got your dry. This is just your mix level. This is your size. I'm going to turn all these down for now. So that's the size of your room. Then you got your pre-delay. And then you got your decay. Now, overall, I think this is actually a pretty good sounding reverb. You also, lastly, you have your tone. So you have low pass or high pass to kind of dial it in. High pass kind of sweetens it up a bit. Or you can go real dark. And And that's just the tone of the reverb. So it's not affecting the, the timbre of your sound so much as it is just the kind of, whether you want a dark or a bright reverb. But you can get, if you really crank these, you can get pretty shimmery. Kind of rad. Yeah, I think the reverb is actually pretty nice, all things considered. Definitely worth playing with. And then up here you have all your other effects. It starts with delay. So just a standard delay. You have a BBD delay, bucket brigade delay. And then you have 2 tape delays. So you can get pretty weird with these ones. The second one just has a little more saturation, I believe. Now it's worth noting all of these effects are clock syncable. Pretty dope. And all of these parameters, individual parameters, are modulatable. So, you could attach it to the mod wheel or an LFO or an envelope or even your aftertouch, like whatever. You can attach any one of these individual parameters to that, which just opens the door for some crazy modulation. It's got a really nice chorus. Let's turn on the second oscillator and detune it a little. Just kill the itch, let's make some strings. So yeah, the chorus is actually pretty nice. I think that's a traditional Oberheim chorus. It's got a flanger. It's got a phaser, which I think sounds like how that sounds, like kind of on the bass. And then what else? We got this is where your high pass filter is. So you have a high pass filter in here, and then lastly, distortion. Distortion's actually pretty nasty. Like I'm redlining over here. That actually adds a lot of grit. You can get pretty nasty with that. Pretty nasty. And then you got your ring mod. Pretty nasty. That's also based on a ring mod pedal that Oberheim did back in the day. And then you got a rotary speaker. So you can hear it's might be fun to modulate that. An LFO or something. Kind of cool. And then I think the last one that we have is a lo-fi. Just adds a little lo-fi. So those are your effects. Take them or don't. I use my Zoya quite a bit for effects, or even just my VST plugins when I go into my DAW, but I love having effects available as part of the sound design process. And these ones are pretty good. And the best thing about it is they're all available. Like I said, each individual parameter is available to you in the mod matrix when you're trying to like modulate the sounds, which is just freaking awesome. So, you know, that's basically it. That's the whole synth. It comes with a ton of plugins. I haven't listened to all of them yet, but you know, factory presets are factory presets. They give you an idea of what it could do. There's a lot of ones I would never in my life imagine using on anything. There's a couple that are really good. Probably all of them are decent starting points that you could just start tweaking from there, if that's your kind of vibe. And if presets are your vibe, there's a ton of them, like I said, and there's even more available by, you know, user created ones that you could purchase or find online and just load them up. If, you know, dialing in presets and tweaking them from there is more your game, this isn't a bad option. I prefer to kind of make my own sounds per track. And honestly, that's what really attracted me to this particular polysynth above some other ones is it's an Oberheim. Like I said, I love that vintage old warm sound, and you can get all those very easily. You can get those sounds here, but it's also very much a modern synth in that it has inherited Sequential's mod matrix, and the mod matrix just allows for some crazy sound design possibilities. You have, you know, your source and your destination. It's as simple as, you know, you find a slot. Let's go down. Let's go up to one. So I don't know. Let's see. What do we want to do? Let's say we've got, let's say that we're working with this pulse here. Let's have an LFO control the pulse width, right? So you would go source, you would turn the LFO just like that. You would go destination, you'd turn the pulse width. It pops up right there. And then this is your attenuator. And this is your mount. Or you could tempo sync it. And then when you tempo sync it, these become basically like clock divisions. I mean, pretty dope, but it's that quick to start modulating stuff, right? And in terms of modulation, what you have in there, you can look in your destinations here. Let's go into destination, and I think you have 19 mod slots. Some of them are defaulted in there, at least in an init patch where, you know, like modulation is going to control by default either the cutoff or probably the LFO to the frequency oscillation. But you can change them to be whatever you want. Up top, these are all the things that drive. So you have alpha 1, alpha 2, envelope 1, envelope 2, voice spread, pitch bend, mod wheel, pressure, breadth, foot, expression, velocity. I mean, you can see there's just a ton of stuff that you can select from to drive, and then even more as a source, or as a destination rather. There's just so many things. I mean, you could send it to anything. Like I said, one thing that's kind of cool is being able to be like, oh, I want the timing of the delay to get a little wacky with velocity. You can do that, or the vintage amount, or, you know, I mean, there's just so many crazy things you can do in here. You can modulate it to your heart's content and just get so freaking weird with it. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. You know, I have actually another polysynth, but my problem with it is I think maybe it's a little bit too simple. It sounds great. It's dialed in and it's really in tune, but I like having the flexibility of really diving into sound design. So that's what I'm really looking forward to here. There you go. I mean, I think we're getting pretty late here, so I don't know if I'm going to do sound design or presets. If that's something you guys would like to see in a video in the future, leave a comment down below. Let me know. I would be happy to do some sound design tutorials and see what kind of crazy sounds we can get out of this thing, because I'm sure we can get a lot. Presets, I'm not as excited about that, but hey, if you want to hear them, I'm happy to kind of dive through them. There's a lot of them. There is a lot of them. Right? But it's a lot of that. But then you get some cool pads. I don't know. You know, I just haven't gone through enough of them. One thing that is cool is every one of these presets also has a sequence in there, which might give you an idea of some of the things you could do with it. So what do I think of it? You know, it's honestly, this is too much of a synth for me to have come to a conclusion. I think I'm going to love it. I know the reasons I bought it, and it's capable of doing those. It can give me those good classic sounds, as well as having the flexibility with the mod matrix to get really weird and to get really in depth with sound design, which is what I'm looking forward to doing. Who's it for? I mean, if you're new to synths, I would recommend getting a monosynth first. I don't think a polysynth should be your first jump, because it's just a lot more to handle, right? Learn the basics of synthesis before you start digging into a polysynth, which is what I did. That's why I know I'm ready to start digging into this. But if you're someone that's a little further along, I don't know why you wouldn't consider an Oberheim. This is, if you're looking for an analog poly synth, this is probably one of the best ones on the market. It's at the top of many people's best of lists for 24 and 25. And, many people regard it already as a modern classic, and it's a pretty new synth. It's fantastic. So, if you're in the market, I definitely would pick up maybe a desktop or something like that. Come on. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I don't know. There's my overview. I hope that was insightful. I hope it was at least interesting, and maybe you know a little bit more about this synth. I'm going to keep playing with it. It's probably going to feature in it's definitely going to feature in some of my songs, and I'm happy to, keep toying with it if people are interested in videos about this. But that's what it's all about. So if you found this interesting, if you found it helpful, consider subscribing. It's a big help to our channel, and we appreciate you to no end. I'll catch you in the next one. Until next time, Ryan from Oakland Ghost, Ryan out.